fait tous des erreurs quand on parle une langue étrangère.
Je m'appelle Claude.
Je te coupe plow.
Et c'est bien normal. Mais certaines erreurs peuvent être plus embarrassantes que d'autres. Il m'est déjà arrivé de confondre coup et cul en français. Donc, je sais de quoi je parle. Aujourd'hui, je vous parle de 4 vraies erreurs que j'ai entendues de la part de mes élèves qui étaient un peu drôles, voire même embarrassantes. Je vous explique pourquoi c'était un peu rigolo et comment dire ce qu'ils voulaient vraiment dire, mais sans malaise. Alors, activez les sous-titres si besoin, parce qu'ici, pour apprendre l'anglais, on parle anglais et let's start. Before we start, I do want to clarify that even though some of these mistakes might be a little bit funny or make native English speakers smile, the aim of this video is not to make fun of anybody. It's simply to explain some of these linguistic or cultural differences, help you to feel more confident when you speak English, and also hopefully help you to avoid making these same mistakes. So let's start with our first awkward mistake. Let me set the scene. So I was taking a class of young adults, and one of my students wanted to let me know he would be running late for class. So he sent me a lovely email, all in English, and the title of this English email was Retard. So while of course I know that this student was translating from French, retard, en retard, retardé, while the words retard, retarded do exist in English, they have a very, very different meaning. They're quite taboo, outdated, and considered quite offensive these days. Originally, the words retard or retarded were used as a really neutral medical term to talk about somebody who has learning disabilities. These days, retard is a very offensive way of referring to somebody who you think is very stupid. And actually, you can really see the evolution in the use of these words even over the last 20 years or so. It would be not impossible, but much less common to hear these words used in popular culture, films, etc. For example, I know there's a very well-known line from the film Mean Girls from 2004.
My mom taught me at home.
No, I know what homeschool is. I'm not retarded.
So here, she's saying, I'm not stupid, I know what that is. Or I'm sure you might know the very popular song from the Black Eyed Peas, which came out around 2003, called Let's Get It Started. That is the clean version. The original version was Let's Get Retarded. And actually these days that version is not even available, and Let's Get It Started has become the standard version of this song. So basically my student sent me an email with a title implying that he thought I was very, very stupid, and of course I know that he didn't mean that, so it just made me laugh, but it would be best to avoid making this mistake, especially if the person receiving your email maybe does not speak French and doesn't understand why you have used this word. And honestly, given how outdated and offensive these words can be, I would just recommend avoiding them altogether. The better alternative here would be just to say late. To be late or to be running late. Before we continue, I'll just remind you that you can download a free PDF summary of these embarrassing mistakes. I'll leave the link in the description. Moving on to our second awkward mistake. So imagine this. I'm taking a class of young international trade students who need to find an internship, and so we are working on their English cover letters. And I have one student who honestly has a really good level of English. He's written his first draft. I'm reading through it to help with corrections, and then I come across this sentence. I'm at your disposal to convince you orally of my qualities. And I am just thinking, yikes, how am I going to explain why we need to change this sentence? The problem here is the word orally. And actually this word, especially oral, can be a really difficult word to navigate in English because oftentimes it's completely harmless. For example, we can talk about an oral presentation, an oral exam, but the word oral by itself is used in informal spoken English to refer to oral sex. And its adverb form orally really gives more of an idea of physically using the mouth. Not so much about speaking. To convince someone orally really means to use your mouth to convince somebody. So essentially what it kind of feels like he's saying in this cover letter is that he's willing to perform certain sexual favors in order to convince this interviewer to hire him. And I can confirm this is definitely not what he wanted to say. Now, we could simply replace the word orally here with verbally. I'm at your disposal to convince you verbally. But even that, honestly, it sounds a little bit unnatural. I understand here he really wants to use or replace the French à l'oral, and we don't really have a good substitute for this in English. We would kind of just word the sentence differently. We could say, for example, I would be delighted to convince you of my suitability for this role in person or during a face-to-face interview. So honestly, the adverb orally, I would recommend just not using it. However, I don't want to scare you away from using the adjective oral. So you'll find a list of certified safe ways to use this word in the PDF. All right, moving on to our third awkward mistake. And actually, this one was not a student. This was a friend of mine. And this was around the beginning of winter. It was starting to get a little bit colder. And she said to me a few times, it's frisky today. I kind of smiled a little bit, and then I realized that I think she was trying to translate from French, il fait frisquer. Now, in English, absolutely, there is a word, frisky. It is sort of originally used to describe someone who has a lot of energy, who wants to play, and we definitely use it to talk about animals, especially, for example, puppies, like baby animals who want to bounce around and play.
Oh, he's a frisky little fella, isn't he?
But especially when we talk about people, it often means that somebody is excited in a kind of sexual way.
Usually at this point in the evening, you start getting frisky.
In this case, the correct thing to say is not that it's frisky, but that it is chilly or nippy. All right, lucky last, number 4, and this is something that came up with a one-to-one client of mine. So she had done all of her self-guided study for the week, but she had done it all on one day, and the goal was to do a little bit every day. And she would often say things like, I need to be regular, or I'm not regular. And this made me smile because in English, the expressions to be regular, to stay regular, to keep regular have an alternative meaning. We use them to talk about having regular bowel movements or regularly going to the toilet to do a poo. What was a little bit funny, or what made me smile here, is that she was kind of unintentionally implying that, maybe she needed to improve her diet so that she would be able to go to the toilet more regularly. Sort of in the late 80s, 90s, I do remember a lot of sort of advertising campaigns.
What was I supposed to do? Call the principal and say I can't teach today because I'm constipated?
For these kinds of products that you can add to your beverages that you drink to help you stay regular.
So with Metamucil, I got regular, stayed regular, and now my problem is ancient history.
So if you want to avoid this slightly funny mistake, I recommend using the word consistent. So I need to be more consistent with my studies. So that's all for today. Let me know again if you learned something new in the comments. Guys, I'm also curious, have you ever made an embarrassing mistake? I certainly have. If you feel comfortable, share in the comments. And if you do want to support my work, please consider subscribing. Don't forget there is a free PDF with a summary of these awkward mistakes in the description. I'll see you again soon. Bye.